The air in Delphi was thick with the scent of burning laurel leaves, their smoke curling upward like whispered prayers to the heavens. The sun hung high in the sky, its golden rays bathing the temple of Apollo in a divine glow. I stood at the foot of the marble steps, my bare feet cool against the stone, and gazed up at the towering columns. They seemed to stretch endlessly, as if reaching for the god himself. I was Lysandra, a priestess of Apollo, chosen for my devotion and purity. My days were spent in service to the god of light, music, and prophecy. I tended the sacred flame, interpreted the dreams of pilgrims, and sang hymns to his glory. But today something felt different. The air was heavier, the light sharper, as if the sun itself were watching me. The ritual was about to begin. Inside the temple, the other priestesses moved in perfect harmony, their white robes flowing like water. The high priestess, Calliope, stood at the altar, her voice ringing out in a chant that echoed through the chamber. I took my place among them, my heart pounding in time with the rhythm of the drums. As the chanting grew louder, I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the pulse of the music and the warmth of the sacred flame. But then something shifted. The light grew brighter, blindingly so, and I felt a sudden chill. My breath caught in my throat as the flames flickered and turned an unnatural shade of blue. The chanting became distorted, the voices twisting into something unrecognizable. I opened my eyes, but the temple was gone. I stood in a vast, empty void surrounded by darkness. The only light came from a figure in the distance, Apollo. His radiant form glowed with an otherworldly brilliance, but as I watched, it began to change. His golden hair turned black, his eyes burned with a cold fire, and his once beautiful face twisted into something monstrous. "The light blinds," a voice whispered, echoing all around me. "But the darkness reveals." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadowy figure of Apollo reached for me, his hand cold as ice. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness closed in, suffocating me, until I felt as though I would drown in it. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. I gasped for air, my body trembling as I found myself back in the temple. The other priestesses were still chanting, their faces serene as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I had seen. Apollo's light was a lie. I stumbled out of the temple, my mind racing. The sun was still shining, but it felt harsh now, almost cruel. I needed to understand what I had seen, but who could I turn to? The high priestess would never believe me. The other priestesses would think me mad. As I stood there, lost in thought, a voice broke through my turmoil. "You saw it, didn't you?" I turned to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, with sun-kissed skin and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. His hair was streaked with gray, and his robes were simple, but there was something about him that commanded attention. "Saw what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The truth," he said, stepping closer. "About Apollo." I hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. But something in his gaze told me he knew more than he was letting on. "Who are you?" I demanded. "My name is Helios," he said. "And I was once like you, a devoted servant of the sun god. But I learned the hard way that not all light is pure." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "What do you mean?" Helios glanced around, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Apollo's power is not what it seems. There is a darkness within him, a secret he has kept hidden for centuries. And if we don't uncover the truth, it could destroy us all." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Could it be true? Was the god I had devoted my life to hiding something so terrible? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you saw the vision," he said. "That means you're the only one who can help me uncover the truth." I felt a surge of fear and excitement. This was my chance to understand what I had seen, to uncover the secrets of the god I served. But it was also a dangerous path, one that could lead to my ruin. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Helios smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We start by looking where Apollo doesn't want us to. The temple archives." As we made our way to the archives, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sun seemed to burn brighter, as if warning me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know the truth. The archives were a labyrinth of scrolls and tablets, each one filled with the wisdom of the ages. Helios moved with purpose, pulling out scrolls and reading them with a practiced eye. I followed his lead, my hands trembling as I unrolled a scroll and began to read. The words were ancient, written in a language I barely understood. But as I read, a pattern began to emerge. Apollo's name was mentioned again and again, but not in the way I expected. There were references to a shadowed light, a stolen power, and a forgotten deity. "What does it mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Helios looked at me, his expression grim. "It means Apollo's power is not his own. He stole it from someone or something else. And if we don't find out the truth, the balance of the world could be destroyed." I felt a chill run down my spine. The god I had devoted my life to was not who I thought he was. And now it was up to me to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As we left the archives, I couldn't help but glance back at the temple. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the marble steps. For the first time, I wondered if those shadows held more truth than the light. And so my journey began. A journey into the darkness, to uncover the secrets hidden by the sun god. But little did I know the darkness had secrets of its own. The sun had barely risen when Helios and I set out from Delphi. The temple archives had revealed enough to set us on a dangerous path, but the full truth still eluded us. The scrolls spoke of an artifact, a relic of immense power that could reveal Apollo's hidden nature. It was called the Obsidian Lyre, and it was said to lie deep within the underworld, guarded by forces even the gods feared. As we walked, the landscape grew darker and more desolate. The lush olive groves and vineyards of Delphi gave way to barren hills and jagged cliffs. The air grew colder, and the sky took on a sickly gray hue. It was as if the land itself knew where we were headed and was warning us to turn back. "The entrance to the underworld is near," Helios said, his voice low. "But crossing the threshold is only the beginning. The real challenge lies beyond." I nodded, though my heart pounded in my chest. I had never ventured beyond the mortal realm, and the thought of facing the unknown filled me with both dread and determination. We reached a narrow ravine, its walls steep and shadowed. At its end stood a massive stone archway, its surface carved with ancient runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Beyond it, the ground sloped downward into a yawning chasm. "This is the Gate of Shadows," Helios said. "Once we pass through, there's no turning back." I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world around me changed. The air grew heavy and cold, and the light dimmed to a faint, eerie glow. The ground beneath my feet was cracked and dry, and the sky, if it could be called that, was a swirling mass of dark clouds. We were in the underworld. The path ahead was treacherous, winding through jagged rocks and pools of black water. Strange shapes moved in the shadows, their eyes glinting like shards of glass. I could feel their gaze on me, but Helios pressed on, his steps steady and sure. "Stay close," he warned. "The spirits here are restless, and they'll take any chance to claim a living soul." As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to shift and twist, forming shapes that almost looked human. I heard whispers, faint and indistinct but filled with malice. "Ignore them," Helios said, his voice firm. "They feed on fear." We reached a river, its waters black and sluggish. A lone boat waited on the shore, its hull cracked and weathered. At the helm stood a figure cloaked in tattered robes, their face hidden beneath a hood. "Charon," Helios murmured. "The ferryman of the dead." Charon extended a bony hand, palm up. Helios placed a coin in it, a golden eyeball engraved with Apollo's symbol. Charon nodded and gestured for us to board. The boat creaked as we stepped aboard, and the moment we were seated, it began to move. The river stretched endlessly before us, its surface reflecting the dim light of the underworld. I stared into the water, and for a moment, I thought I saw faces staring back at me, faces twisted in agony and despair. "Don't look too long," Helios warned. "The river Styx has a way of pulling you in." I tore my gaze away, focusing instead on the distant shore. As we drew closer, I saw a massive gate, its iron bars twisted into the shapes of writhing figures. Beyond it lay a vast, desolate plain, dotted with flickering lights. "The fields of Asphodel," Helios said, "where the souls of the ordinary dead reside." We disembarked and made our way through the gate. The air was thick with the scent of ash and decay, and the ground crunched beneath our feet. The souls here moved aimlessly, their forms translucent and ghostly. But we didn't stop. Helios led me through the fields of asphodel and into a darker, more foreboding region. The ground here was cracked and barren, and the air was filled with the sound of distant screams. "The fields of punishment," Helios said grimly, "where the wicked are tormented for eternity." I shuddered but pressed on. We had a mission, and I couldn't let fear stop me. Finally, we reached a massive cavern, its entrance guarded by a three-headed dog. Cerberus. The beast snarled as we approached, its eyes glowing like embers. "Stay back," Helios said, drawing a small lyre from his pack. He began to play, his fingers moving deftly over the strings. The music was haunting and beautiful, and to my surprise, Cerberus's growls subsided. The beast lay down, its head resting on its paws, and closed its eyes. "Quickly," Helios whispered, gesturing for me to follow. We slipped past Cerberus and into the cavern. The walls were lined with jagged crystals that glowed with an eerie light, and the air was thick with the scent of sulfur. At the center of the cavern stood a pedestal, and on it rested the obsidian lyre. The lyre was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its frame was carved from black stone, and its strings shimmered like strands of moonlight. But as I reached for it, a voice echoed through the cavern. "You dare trespass here?" I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. She was tall and regal, her dark robes flowing like liquid night. Her eyes glowed with a cold, otherworldly light, and her presence filled the cavern with an oppressive weight. "Persephone," Helios said, bowing low. The queen of the underworld regarded us with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "You seek the obsidian lyre," she said, her voice like the whisper of wind through dead leaves. "But do you know what it truly is?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "It is a relic of the Titans," Persephone said, her gaze piercing. "Forged in the fires of chaos and imbued with the power of shadow. Apollo stole it long ago, using its power to mask his true nature. But the balance of light and dark cannot be broken without consequence. We seek to restore that balance," Helios said, "to uncover the truth and prevent the world from falling into chaos." Persephone studied us for a long moment, then nodded. "Take it," she said. "But know this, the path you walk is fraught with peril. Apollo will not relinquish his secrets lightly, and the darkness you seek to unveil may consume you." I reached for the lyre, my fingers trembling as they closed around its frame. The moment I touched it, a surge of energy coursed through me, cold and sharp as a blade. "Thank you," I said, bowing my head. Persephone's gaze softened just for a moment. "Go," she said, "and may the fates guide you." We left the cavern, the obsidian lyre clutched tightly in my hands. But as we stepped back into the fields of punishment, the ground began to shake. A voice boomed through the air, filled with rage and power. "You dare challenge the sun?" Apollo's wrath was upon us. The ground beneath us trembled violently, sending cracks snaking across the barren earth of the underworld. The air grew hotter, as if the sun itself had descended into this shadowed realm. Apollo's voice echoed like thunder, reverberating through the caverns and plains of the dead. "Run!" Helios shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me forward. We sprinted through the fields of punishment, the obsidian lyre clutched tightly in my hands. The weight of it seemed to grow with every step, as though it carried the burden of the secrets we were about to unveil. Behind us, the sky, or what passed for a sky in this place, began to brighten, a golden light piercing through the perpetual gloom. "He's coming," I gasped, my legs burning with exertion. "We need to reach the river," Helios said, his voice strained. "Charon can take us back to the mortal world. Apollo's power is weaker there." The golden light grew brighter, and I could feel the heat of it on my back. I dared a glance over my shoulder and saw a figure emerging from the light, Apollo, his radiant form blazing like a second sun. His eyes burned with fury, and in his hand he held a bow of pure light, an arrow already nocked and aimed at us. "Lysandra!" Helios yelled, yanking me behind a jagged outcrop of rock just as the arrow struck. The impact sent shards of stone flying, and I stumbled, barely keeping hold of the lyre. "You cannot hide from me," Apollo's voice boomed. "You dare steal what is mine. You dare challenge the sun." Helios peeked around the rock, his face pale. "We need to keep moving. If he catches us here, we're finished." I nodded, my heart pounding. "What do we do?" We fight, Helios said grimly. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small vial filled with a shimmering liquid. This is water from the river Leth. If we can distract him long enough to make him drink it, he'll forget why he's chasing us, at least for a while. And how do we make a god drink it? I asked, my voice trembling. Helios gave me a grim smile. We'll have to get creative. We darted from behind the rock, running toward the river Styx. Apollo's laughter echoed behind us, cruel and mocking. Another arrow of light streaked past, narrowly missing us. The ground shook again, and I stumbled, falling to my knees. Get up, Helios shouted, pulling me to my feet. We reached the river just as Apollo descended, his golden form illuminating the dark waters. Charon's boat was nowhere to be seen. Charon, Helios called, desperation in his voice. We need passage. The ferryman emerged from the shadows, his hooded face unreadable. He extended his hand, and Helios placed another golden obol in it. Charon nodded and gestured for us to board. But before we could move, Apollo landed on the shore, his light so intense it hurt to look at him. You think you can escape me, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. You are nothing but insects scurrying in the dark. Helios stepped forward, shielding me with his body. Apollo, we don't want to fight you. We only seek the truth. The truth, Apollo sneered. The truth is that I am the light, the bringer of order and reason. You would plunge the world into chaos with your meddling. The truth is that your light is a lie, I said, my voice shaking but firm. You stole your power, and now the balance is breaking. We're trying to fix what you broke. Apollo's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in them. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Enough, he said, raising his bow. You will not leave this place alive. Helios lunged forward, throwing the vial of Leth water at Apollo. The god swatted it away with a flick of his hand, but the vial shattered, and droplets of the liquid sprayed into the air. Apollo recoiled, shielding his face, and in that moment of distraction, Helios grabbed my arm and pulled me onto Charon's boat. Go, Helios shouted. Charon pushed off from the shore, the boat gliding swiftly across the black waters. Apollo roared in fury, firing another arrow, but it struck the water harmlessly, sending up a plume of steam. We were safe for now. As we crossed the river, I clutched the obsidian lyre, my mind racing. Apollo's wrath was terrifying, but it only confirmed that we were on the right path. The lyre was the key to uncovering the truth, and we couldn't stop now. When we reached the other side, Helios and I stepped off the boat and made our way back to the Gate of Shadows. The journey through the underworld had left me exhausted, but there was no time to rest. Apollo would not give up so easily. As we passed through the gate and back into the mortal world, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. The air was cooler here, but the tension between light and dark felt more palpable than ever. We need to perform the ritual, Helios said as we walked. The obsidian lyre will reveal Apollo's true nature, but we must do it quickly. He'll be coming for us. I nodded, though my hands trembled at the thought. Where should we do it? The Temple of Delphi, Helios said. It's the heart of Apollo's power. If we perform the ritual there, it will have the greatest impact. The idea of returning to the temple filled me with dread. It was the place where I had served Apollo for so long, where I had believed in his light without question. Now it would become the stage for his reckoning. When we reached Delphi, the city was eerily quiet. The streets were empty, and the temple loomed in the distance, its columns glowing faintly in the twilight. It was as if the city itself sensed the coming storm. We entered the temple, the obsidian lyre in my hands. The sacred flame still burned at the altar, but its light seemed dimmer, weaker. The other priestesses were nowhere to be seen, and the air was thick with tension. We need to prepare, Helios said, pulling out a small pouch of herbs and placing them around the altar. The ritual requires precision. One mistake and it could backfire. I set the lyre on the altar, its black frame gleaming in the firelight. As I did, I felt a strange energy emanating from it, cold and ancient. It was as if the lyre itself was alive, waiting to be awakened. Helios began to chant, his voice low and steady. I joined in, the words unfamiliar but flowing naturally from my lips. The air around us seemed to hum with power, and the flames of the sacred fire flickered and danced. As we chanted, the shadows in the temple began to shift and grow, stretching toward the altar. The obsidian lyre began to glow, its strings vibrating with a sound that was both beautiful and haunting. But then, the temple doors burst open, and Apollo strode in, his light filling the space. "You dare defile my temple," he roared, his voice shaking the walls. Helios and I exchanged a glance, then continued the chant. The ritual was almost complete. Apollo raised his bow, aiming it at us. "This ends now?" But before he could fire, the shadows surged forward, wrapping around him like chains. The light of his form dimmed, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes: fear. The obsidian lyre's glow intensified, and a voice echoed through the temple, deep and resonant. "The light blinds, but the darkness reveals." Apollo struggled against the shadows, his light flickering like a dying flame. And then the truth was laid bare. His radiant form faded, revealing a figure of both light and shadow, his power a fragile balance between the two. The obsidian lyre had done its work. Apollo fell to his knees, his head bowed. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "I did what I had to do. The shadows were too powerful, too chaotic. I had to control them. But in doing so, you broke the balance," I said, stepping forward. "And now the world is paying the price." Apollo looked up at me, his eyes filled with regret. "What would you have me do?" "Restore the balance," Helios said. "Return what you stole." For a long moment, Apollo was silent. Then he nodded. "Very well." He raised his hands, and the light around him dimmed further. A portion of his power flowed out of him, returning to the shadows from which it had been taken. The temple trembled, and the sacred flame flickered, but it did not go out. When it was done, Apollo stood, his form no longer blinding but still radiant. "The balance is restored," he said. "But the world will never be the same." He turned and walked out of the temple, his light fading into the night. Helios and I stood in silence, the weight of what we had done settling over us. The obsidian lyre lay on the altar, its glow fading. "It's over," Helios said quietly. But as I looked out at the horizon, where the sun met the shadows, I couldn't help but wonder if this was only the beginning. The balance had been restored, but at what cost? And what other secrets lay hidden in the darkness? For now the sun had set and the world was quiet. But I knew that the dance of light and shadow would continue, and I would be there to witness it. The journey was far from over. The aftermath of the ritual settled over Delphi like a shroud. The once vibrant city now held its breath, caught between the echoes of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Apollo's departure had left a void, not just in the heavens but in the hearts of those who had worshipped him for centuries. Yet in that void, a new understanding began to take root. I stood on the steps of the temple, the obsidian lyre resting in its place on the altar within. Its dark surface no longer pulsed with otherworldly energy, but it held a quiet power, a reminder of the balance that had been restored. Helios had departed at dawn, his silhouette disappearing into the morning mist. He carried with him the weight of his past and the hope of a new purpose, to guide others who had been wronged by the gods, to help them find their own balance. As for me, I remained in Delphi. The high priestess, Calliope, had fallen into a deep slumber after the ritual, her connection to Apollo severed. The other priestesses looked to me for guidance, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. It was a heavy burden, but one I accepted willingly. The vision in the temple, the journey to the underworld, and the confrontation with Apollo had changed me. I was no longer just a devoted servant. I was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of balance. In the days that followed, I delved deeper into the temple archives, seeking to understand the full extent of what had happened. The scrolls spoke of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, and how Apollo had stolen a portion of her power to fuel his own light. But they also spoke of other gods, other imbalances, and other secrets hidden in the shadows. The world, I realized, was far more complex than I had ever imagined. The gods were not infallible beings of pure light or darkness, but intricate tapestries of both, their power intertwined and their motives often shrouded in mystery. And mortals, caught in the middle, were not mere pawns in their games but active participants in the dance of existence. As I studied, the people of Delphi began to change. The fear that had gripped them after Apollo's departure slowly gave way to a cautious curiosity. They came to the temple, not to offer prayers to a distant god, but to seek answers, to understand the truth that had been revealed. I shared with them what I had learned, speaking not of blind devotion but of balance, of the interconnectedness of light and shadow. I told them of Nyx and Apollo, of the obsidian lyre, and of the delicate equilibrium that held the cosmos together. And slowly, Delphi began to heal. The oracle remained silent, but the temple became a place of learning, a sanctuary where mortals and gods could coexist not in fear or servitude, but in understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I climbed to the highest point in the city. From there, I could see the temple, the winding streets, and the distant hills, all bathed in the soft glow of twilight. It was in that moment, as I watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, that I heard a voice, faint but familiar. The balance is restored for now. It was the voice of Nyx, the goddess of night, her words carried on the gentle breeze. I closed my eyes, listening to the whisper of the wind, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. The world was changing, and with it, the relationship between mortals and gods. The age of blind faith was ending, and a new era was dawning, an era of understanding where the light and the shadows would dance together in a delicate, eternal balance. As I stood there, gazing at the horizon, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were other secrets to uncover, other imbalances to address. But I was no longer a young priestess, blindly following the light. I was Lysandra, a keeper of knowledge, a guardian of balance, and I was ready to face whatever the future held. The sun had set, but a new day was dawning. And in that dawn, I saw not just the absence of light, but the potential for a deeper, more meaningful connection between mortals and the divine. The dance of existence continued, and I, along with the people of Delphi, was ready to take my place in it. The gods were not gone, but they were no longer distant, unreachable beings. They were part of the world, just as we were, and together we would navigate the complexities of light and shadow, of order and chaos, of life and death. The obsidian lyre remained in the temple, a silent testament to the power of truth and the importance of balance. And as the stars shone down on Delphi, I knew that the secrets of the gods were not meant to be feared, but understood. For in understanding, we find our own power, our own light, and our own place in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. The journey had just begun,